U.S. President Donald Trump threatens 200% tariffs on European alcohol products amid the ongoing trade war in response to the EU's latest tit-for-tat tariffs against the U.S. The local economy continues to feel pressure due to weaker consumer sentiments and growing trade uncertainties, says the Finance Authority's latest Green Book. Calling North Korea once again a nuclear power, President Trump highlights his good relationship with the regime's leader Kim Jong-un, hinting at a possible revival of U.S. diplomacy with the regime. It's March 14th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with the ongoing global trade war. President Trump warns of a 200% tariff on European wine and champagne if the EU proceeds with a 50% levy on American whiskey. All this started with U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum products this week. Park Go-nu explains.
The U.S.-led trade war is intensifying as President Donald Trump told reporters on Thursday that he would not reconsider reciprocal tariffs set to be imposed on April 2nd.
Look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. Aluminum or steel or cars, we're not going to bend.
Trump also uploaded a post on social media threatening that he would soon impose a 200% tariff on alcohol products, coming out of France and other EU-represented countries, saying that would be great for U.S. wine and champagne businesses. That's in response to plans announced by the European Commission on Wednesday to retaliate with tariffs on U.S. goods worth $28 billion, including a 50% tariff on whiskey from April. This came after the U.S. started imposing a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports from Wednesday. EU Commission head Ursula von der Leyen, during a visit to South Africa, said on Thursday the EU would defend its interests, while adding that it's also open to negotiations. She also said the bloc's trade commissioner plans to speak with his U.S. counterpart on related issues over the phone on Friday. And with the trade war intensifying, trade officials from South Korea visited Washington to discuss tariff issues.
If we're taking an exam, there must be some grading criteria. We need to first understand that criteria, and based on that, we should quickly correct any mistakes and need to persuade them on the points where we can.
He added that they plan to request reciprocal measures to minimize the impact of the upcoming U.S. reciprocal tariffs. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Acting President Choi Sang-mok has urged close cooperation among financial authorities to ensure market stability. During a related meeting on Friday, Choi highlighted the possibility of volatility in light of uncertainty over external factors, including the Trump administration's tariff campaign and its broader ripple effects. That being said, he also underscored the importance of a 24-hour monitoring system to track financial and foreign exchange markets to allow for a swift and coordinated response. Meanwhile, uncertainties over domestic politics and U.S. tariffs continue to weigh heavily on the Korean economy. Our Lee Soo-jin has the latest economic assessment.
South Korea's economy is facing growing pressure as domestic demand remains weak and global uncertainties worsen. That's according to the latest Economic Green Book, a monthly economic assessment report released by the Finance Ministry on Friday. This also marks the fourth consecutive month that the government stated that the economy faces growing downside pressure in its report, after first including the phrase in its December Green Book after the martial law declaration.
We began using the term economic downward pressure as uncertainties grew, which can be categorized into two types currently. The first is domestic uncertainty, leading to a decline in consumer sentiment. The second is trade uncertainty from Trump's policies.
While the overall assessment was largely reminiscent of last month's, this month's report also highlighted that the growth in exports is slowing. The daily exports average came to $2.4 billion in February, a nearly 6% drop compared to the previous year.
Because of the tariffs that are put by the Trump administration, as well as domestic political problems sparked by the Trump administration, we're seeing growth in the U.S. slowing down, and that is affecting the global economy as well as Korean exports as well.
Recovering domestic demand also remains sluggish as consumption and investment slow. Retail sales, a key measure of consumer spending in January, fell 0.6% compared to the previous month as sales of both semi-durable goods and non-durable goods declined. As for retail sales in February, drops in sales at department stores and large supermarkets are expected to have a negative impact, while the rise in credit card transactions and increased auto sales are projected to act as positive factors. Investment also showed a sharp decline as facility investment in January plunged more than 14% on month, marking the biggest drop since October 2020 due to decreases in investments in machinery such as semiconductor manufacturing and transport equipment. To address ongoing concerns, the government plans to further strengthen support for local businesses affected by U.S. tariffs and to mitigate trade uncertainties through measures that include establishing a dedicated financial support fund. 이수진, Arirang News.
On to the political front, acting President Choi has vetoed a bill calling for a special probe into an obscure political broker called Myung-tae-gyun. The veto was largely expected and came on Friday at a cabinet meeting during which Choi pointed out that Myung was already under investigation by the prosecution. Last month, the main opposition Democratic Party unilaterally passed a bill seeking to investigate allegations of election fraud involving President Yoon Suk-yeol, First Lady Kim Jong-un, and Myung. Mr. Trump has referred to North Korea as a nuclear power again, as he touted his ties with Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-sil covers his latest remarks and the response from South Korea's unification ministry.
U.S. President Donald Trump once again expressed confidence in his leadership with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
I had a great relationship with Kim Jong-un, North Korea. If I wasn't elected, if Hillary got in, you would have had a nuclear war with North Korea.
Speaking to reporters in Washington on Thursday, Trump emphasized the importance of continuing dialogue, referring to North Korea as a nuclear power, a recognition with significant diplomatic implications. In response, a spokesperson from the South Korean Ministry of Unification reaffirmed the nation's unwavering commitment to North Korea's denuclearization.
North Korea's denuclearization remains a steadfast principle upheld by South Korea, the U.S., and the international community. Our government will continue to strengthen close cooperation with the new U.S. administration to achieve this objective.
Trump also reflected on how his diplomatic efforts, including several meetings with Kim Jong-un during his first term, contributed to the success of the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea.
The meeting caused the Olympics, which was in South Korea, to become a tremendous success. Nobody was buying tickets for the Olympics because they didn't want to be nuked. And I met, and not only did the Olympics become successful, but North Korea participated in the Olympics.
However, the first U.S.-North Korea summit took place in June 2018, 4 months after the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics concluded in February. While discussions about renewed dialogue continue, experts suggest that priorities like trade tariffs may delay progress. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The government has renewed its calls for the immediate release of 3 South Korean missionaries detained in North Korea for over a decade. The Ministry of Unification strongly condemned Pyongyang's unlawful actions on Friday and called for the immediate and unconditional release of the South Korean nationals. This follows the recent adoption of an opinion by the UN Human Rights Council's Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, which condemned their detention as unjustifiable. Released Thursday, the opinion demands their release, compensation, and an independent investigation. The Army forces of South Korea and the U.S. have held a special target exercise aimed at enhancing strike capabilities in nighttime conditions. South Korea's Army Special Warfare Command said Friday that around 250 troops from the two countries, as well as 16 aircraft, took part in the drill, including South Korea's CH-47 Chinook helicopters and the U.S. Black Hawks. The training involved clearing paths in pitch-black darkness, using advanced equipment to swiftly and precisely strike the enemy's critical facilities. The joint special target exercise was conducted over the past 4 days, from Monday through Wednesday. In other news, Russian President Vladimir Putin has come up with his own demands for the 30-day ceasefire proposed by the U.S. and Ukraine, asking concessions from Kyiv. Choi Soo-hyung tells us more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said he agreed in principle with the U.S. proposed 30-day Ukraine ceasefire plan, but further terms and details need to be worked out.
We agree with the proposals to stop hostilities, but we proceed from the fact that this ceasefire should be such that it would lead to long-term peace and eliminate the original roots of this crisis.
On Thursday, at a news conference in Moscow, he said the idea was correct and he supported it, but he needs to discuss it with U.S. President Donald Trump, referring to him as our American partner. Putin added that Ukraine would need to accept future conditions before the ceasefire agreement could be reached. He said that a decision should be made on how to handle isolated Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region, one of the areas of contention which he claimed Russia had regained full control of. He also stated that the ceasefire must be ensured, as Ukraine might use the period to secure more troops and supplies of weapons. In response, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy claimed that Putin is tactically preparing to reject the ceasefire deal. Zelenskyy said Putin is the one who will make the situation worse.
We have all just heard very predictable and highly manipulative words from Russia in response to the idea of a ceasefire on the front. We do not set conditions that complicate things. Russia does. Putin has stolen years of peace and continues this war day by day.
He criticized Putin's response as deceptive, stating that the Russian leader was effectively refusing to accept the ceasefire proposal, but responded in this way because he was afraid to tell the U.S. that he wanted to continue the war. Putin is expected to discuss the Ukraine conflict and ceasefire with U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, in Moscow. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Friday means it's time for arts and culture. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin joins me in the studio. Welcome, Yoo-jin.
Happy Friday, Jung-min.
Happy Friday. What do you have for us today?
Well, Jung-min, this weekend, history will literally take center stage here in Korea as a powerful ballet piece is proving that stories aren't just written in ink, but they can also be brought to life through movement. So this piece is a production that pays tribute to an independence hero whose final wish was to dance for Korea's freedom. First, take a look.
Jumps, turns, and twirls. Sometimes movement speaks louder than words. The Korean ballet Anjungun, A Dance in Heaven, marks its 10th anniversary this year. An is best remembered for pulling the trigger that changed history, assassinating Japan's first resident general of Korea, Hirobumi Ito. Ito is known to have orchestrated the 1905 Ulsa Treaty, stripping Korea of its diplomatic sovereignty. Director and scriptwriter Yang Young-eun says An's final words before his execution became the heartbeat of this production.
His words, "When I hear the sound of Korea's independence ringing from heaven, I will dance with joy," I realized he must have danced in moments of happiness. That's when I thought, why not tell his story through ballet, one of the purest forms of art?
The ballet traces An's life from his marriage to his beloved wife Kim Aryo at 15 to his final moments at 31. ballerinos Yoon Jeon-il and Lee Dong-tak play on, which they call an incredible honor.
I've read books, watched documentaries, and studied historical records, but I tried to embody his sacrifices and convictions. I kept asking myself, why did he make those choices? What must it have felt like to give up everything for a greater cause?
I wanted to ensure that An's story in our production flowed seamlessly from the battles he fought, the sorrow of losing his fellow soldiers, his resilience, and how he ultimately carried out his mission.
An's love, agony, and unwavering determination are expressed entirely through motion. This is where the ballet took a bold turn, breaking tradition with creative choices, most notably a rare male Gov't ballet sequence.
Typically, ballet prioritizes symmetry and uniformity, but we push beyond convention. More balanced shifts, expressive upper body movements, and dynamic movements. And our choreographer's pas de deux beautifully conveys Han, Korea's deep sorrow and resilience.
A story once confined to history books now lives on through dance. Each step a heartbeat, each leap a cry for freedom.
It is impressive. Eugene, so this ballet is set to take the stage this weekend. What can audiences expect?
Well, first of all, the 70-minute performance will take place twice, once on Saturday afternoon and the other on Sunday at the Seoul Art Center, as mentioned in my report. And what's really notable about this production this time is that it's inviting National Merit awardees, their families, and those in uniform as part of an effort to promote a shared culture of honoring national service. And there's also a student discount for middle school, high school, and university students to really encourage the younger generation to connect with Korea's history of independence. For more information, you can visit this Seoul Art Center's official website. And I also want to mention that the cast is quite remarkable because principal dancers from Korea's top 2 ballet companies will share the stage. Lee Dong-tak from the Universal Ballet Company mentioned in my report, and Kim Lee-hwae from the Korea National Ballet, who are playing An Jung-gun and his wife Kim Aryo. And director Yang also shared that one of the most powerful moments in the performance has been reworked, the scene where An dreams of his wife after losing his fellow independence fighters in battle. And for the 10th anniversary edition, the choreography and the music have been adjusted to better convey An's guilt and inner turmoil.
Sounds incredible. And I'm sure many of our international viewers might be wondering, will they get a chance to see this piece overseas?
Well, I can say not yet, but hopefully soon, because for the past decade, this production has been really working to solidify his position in Korea's ballet scene. And I want to mention that this is not just a small feat, because here in Korea, especially locally grown, homegrown productions, they're really hard to continue staying on the stage, mainly due to budget constraints. So the fact that this production managed to last for 10 years is really proving that it has found its audience here in Korea. So with that being said, the future looks bright for an international run, because since ballet relies entirely on movement and expression, this means that there's no language barrier, making it accessible to audiences worldwide. So hopefully it won't be not too long until we see this production, An Jung-gun, Dance in Heaven, meet international ballet lovers all around the world.
Our culture correspondent, Song Yujin, thank you as always.
Always a pleasure.
Meanwhile, the southern city of Yeosu is poised to welcome more than 7 cruise ships this year alone. Quite a different scene from the past, at the height of the global pandemic. Our An Song-jin was at the port.
A 78,000-ton cruise ship with more than 2,000 passengers glides into port. This cruise has come from Japan and has arrived at its first stop in South Korea, the south coast city of Yeosu. Yeosu City Hall aims to provide a glimpse of Korean culture through such traditional performances and show unique aspects of the city as it looks to brand itself as a new cruise destination. As soon as visitors finish their customs checks, they are greeted by Korean snacks, jewelry, and craft work. And for those looking to explore the city even further, a shuttle bus takes them around for free.
Every time we pulled into a port, like today here in South Korea, we were met with wonderful performances, and we found everyone to be very welcoming. We really appreciate the shuttles, and it really helps us to see and to navigate easily.
From must-visit places such as the Isunshin Plaza and its replica historical turtle ship, to the beauty of Odongdo Island or the ocean cable car, the city has plenty for tourists to see and do. After the excitement of Yeosu City, these passengers will head to their next stop in Korea.
Well, we're pretty old hats at this, so we've been doing it this is probably our 12th cruise. Oh, just enjoying this area right here. We really don't know much about, was it Yeosu? Yeosu? Yeah, I don't really know much about that, but we're looking forward to Jeju tomorrow.
To accommodate all the tourists, the city provides administrative support, including temporary currency exchange and tourism information centers, as well as interpreters and tour guides.
With more cruise visitors, whether it's shopping or dining, the local economy of Yeosu is becoming more active. I think this will be an opportunity to improve its brand image and further promote itself, which is why we are putting a lot of attention and support into these MICE and cruise businesses.
The city is expecting to welcome another 6 cruises this year, carrying a total of 10,000 tourists as it looks to put itself on the map as a cruise destination. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Yeosu.
The yellow dust that covered the skies in the Seoul metropolitan area and the Chungcheongdo provinces yesterday has all been blown away by the easterly winds. For the time being, clear skies will continue nationwide. The temperature in Seoul rose up to 18 degrees Celsius today, recording the highest temperature this year. It will continue to be warm tomorrow, with Seoul reaching up to 16 degrees, but there's rain forecast mainly on the south coast and Jeju Island. On Sunday, there will be sudden change in weather conditions. As the cold is expected to make a return, Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces will have heavy snow, which will spread to all over the country. Tomorrow morning will be as warm as 7 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju, and Daegu. Highs will move up to 12 to 16 degrees in most areas. The temperatures in inland areas will fall below 0 degrees next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea if you've signed a contract for a one room. Obviously, you're a pro. But the real deal begins now. Step 1. Housewarming. No need to buy toilet paper, diffusers or hand soap. You'll get them soon enough as housewarming gifts. And some are bound to pile up. There's nothing better to serve your guests than milpaeyu nabe. If you have Korean friends coming over, don't forget the extra garlic. Step 2. Garbage disposal. With great power comes great responsibility. You've had a good time, so let's get to work. It might be tempting to sweep everything into a trash can, but you have to separate your garbage. Not bothered? Beware that negligence is punished with a fine or public humiliation. Step 3. Drying rack. You're excited to live alone in Korea, but the fate of these items, hanger, storage, or a hanger. Go get fresh coffee outside. Jogging doesn't cost anything, and nothing beats instant rice. But keep one item around so that you don't get too lonely. Step 4. Pros of living alone. No mum. Cons of living alone. No mum. A new towel doesn't magically appear. You have to do the laundry regularly. If anyone gives a towel as a souvenir, take it. Get rid of mold immediately. Don't be lazy with the vacuum cleaner. Housework is an endless affair. Overwhelmed? Give your mum a call and thank her for everything she's done. Did you survive in your one room? Wait, you have an unwanted visitor. Call someone you fancy. Could be the right person for the job.
Our lives are swept into a vortex of this intricately connected world. Providing an in-depth exploration of global security, diplomacy, economy, and culture to offer a unique international perspective. Embark on a global news journey with the Geovista today.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. More than 100 days have passed since President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law on December 3rd, an extraordinary move that has placed him at the center of an unprecedented legal and constitutional crisis. Now he becomes the first sitting South Korean president to simultaneously face both an impeachment trial and criminal prosecution. As the Constitutional Court extends its deliberations, Yoon's impeachment case is likely to set a historic precedent as the longest in the nation's history. With no ruling date yet announced, the uncertainty surrounding the case continues to grow. Meanwhile, a court has overturned his detention, citing procedural clarity and concerns over investigative legitimacy, adding another layer of complexity to the unfolding legal battle. To provide insights into these unfolding events, we have invited attorney An Jun-sung here in the studio with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also joining us online is Song Se-ryun, professor of law at Kyunghee University. Great to have you, Professor Song.
Happy to join you.
So let's start right away with Professor Song. So the Seoul Central District Court overturned Yoon's detention with a ruling that canceled it, citing procedural clarity and eliminating doubts about investigative legitimacy. How can this reasoning be interpreted legally, Professor?
Well, the decision was made mainly on a procedural ground. It was a procedural victory for the defense team. Gives a justification why you use expensive lawyers. They examined the process with microscopic eyes and found a procedural argument that took actually many people by surprise. What it is was that the detention is usually given 10 days for the prosecution, but during the duration of the detention period, if the court engages itself for review, that time, that duration of review is added back to the detention period. Convention has it that you count it by days, but the court's review sometimes result in how many hours they spend on it. So the ambiguity between whether to use days or hours, the convention has it that we use days so far, but once the defense team raised the issue that if you use the days, there are cases where the detention period is more than 10 days, even with the added hours. So I think that the court was compelled to look at it and say that, well, if it results in more detention days or detention hours, then the human rights of the accused is abridged. So and that procedural ground, they said that the charges were made, the indictment was made after the expiry of the detention days. What was surprising was that when they were talking about the jurisdictional issues of a CIO's authority to investigate the insurrection charges, they mentioned it only because the defense team raised it, and they put it in the decision to say that they didn't have to review it on the merits because the procedural ground was enough to make a decision. But a lot of people saw the little bit ambiguous language saying to see that the court has some doubts or have some serious concerns about the jurisdictional issues. I didn't necessarily read it that way, but people will just selectively read it and understand it the way they like it.
Mm-hmm. So with this latest decision to, release President Yoon from detention, in response to this, Chun Dae-yup, of the chief of the Supreme Court's administration office and also a judge, said that immediate appeal by prosecutors is needed to obtain higher court's ruling. So Attorney An, first, what legal limits exist regarding public comments by senior judges in ongoing cases?
Well, actually, for the question, right? Before we briefly talk about the Korean court system, and then the Korean Constitution vests judicial power in the ordinary court, and also create independent constitutional court with the exclusive jurisdiction over certain matters, such as the impeachment cases against President Yoon Suk-yeol. Right, and then Chun Dae-yup, obviously, he's the Supreme Court justice, right, not the Constitutional Court. Therefore, that he's not a sitting judge of the impeachment case. Means that, generally speaking, when you talk about the judge behavior, whether they can have some public comment, anything, is related on the case, on the merit. Whether is this case, is this person sitting in the case, or actually any impact, or indirectly or directly. However, he's not related, and plus the KCC and then the Supreme Court is separate and distinct court. They're not really related. So technically speaking, and plus that Constitutional Court is considered higher than the Supreme Court in Korea. So his comment, public comment made by the Supreme Court justice, I don't think there's any legal influence on the on impending the impeachment trial at all. About his comment, I think that his comment was not really personal comment. I think he spoke on behalf of his, the court, right, Supreme Court. Basically, I think Supreme Court tried to get the final ruling on the legal issue, whether or not the detention period should be deducted by day or by hour. Because there's a split opinion by lower courts in several cases, so many people confused on which was right. So it's time for Supreme Court to kick in to make a decision so that we have better consistency on the ruling. I think that's the what Chundeon point.
Mm-hmm. But then, from a legal standpoint, is this procedure that he proposed actually viable? And were there previous cases that were similar to it?
Well, yeah. Actually, looking at the Korean criminal court, basically you have a 7-day window to file for the immediate appeal, right? And however, that we have two questions to ask. If you ask that, how many cases actually file? I mean, file for immediate appeal, and obviously it's going to be many cases, but we don't know how many. But the second question is that how many times the court reverses its decision and due to the immediate file by the prosecutor office. And according to the press, there has been at least 5 confirmed cases that reverse their position and about the issues. So, and the interesting that the chief prosecutor made a public comment that he had a concern that, and the reason he did not actually bring up the immediate appeal issue is that he concerned that it would trigger another constitutional debate. Something in further, political debate on issues. So, however, based on the press finding and the cases, that there is still something to discuss on that issue, and then prosecutor have to answer the question actually, like how we're gonna do it, right?
So, based on precedents, it's not quite likely to be reversed.
Well, it's more like there's the mixed opinion about. So some court justice think that this should calculate by day, or some believe that it should be hours. So Supreme Court have to decide it, make a final ruling for the consistency of the legal system here.
All right. Now, staying with this, Professor Song, President Yoon's legal team argues that the suggestion for an appeal infringed upon prosecutorial authority. Given that an appeal is possible within 7 days, like Attorney An has mentioned, with the current situation, what are the chances that a higher court could overturn the release decision?
Well, a lot of legal questions or debates are unprecedented because of the kind of novel nature. So we don't know what the Supreme Court would say, higher court would just say. Even in this case, the prosecutor's office abandoned the chance to appeal, saying that there are constitutional precedents to say that the appeal would immediately be struck down because that has an effect of lengthening the detention period. Yes, there are precedents, but they are not really case on point because they dealt with the bail issues and the execution of the detention. But at this time, the procedure is a little bit different. So I think a lot of people are now saying is that the prosecutor's office should have filed for an immediate appeal just to see what kind of clarity that the higher court would render. They're blaming the prosecutor's office, kind of interpreting their own position and using it as an authority. I think that the higher courts, whatever the consequence might have been, I think it would have been better to have the higher court consider on the merits and decide on it so that there will be a clear precedent. But we lost the chance. Even for the file of the appeal, the prosecutor's office position is that once you release the accused, it's deemed to have waived your right to appeal. not necessarily the final position, and that decision has not been rendered by the higher court. So even that is kind of an uncertain ground at this point.
Right. So as of now, we've lost a chance for the immediate appeal deadline, right?
Right. That's at least the prosecutor's office position.
Now, shifting to Yoon's impeachment trial, Professor, in previous impeachment cases, such as those of former Presidents Roh Moo-hyun and Park Geun-hye, final rulings were delivered within 11 to 14 days, roughly 2 weeks after closing arguments. Why is President Yoon's case taking longer?
Well, the cases are different by the facts and the circumstances. For example, President Roh Moo-hyun's case was relatively simple. What he said during the campaign, whether that would contribute to the election results, that was probably a simpler issue. In this case, even the President Park Geun-hye's case, the legal arguments were complex, but the kind of a public opinions were kind of gravitating on one direction of the impeachment. Now, in this case, the President Yoon's legal actions probably played out on television, so facts are pretty clear, but the arguments are more complex and very nuanced. We're talking about the separation of powers, where the president's power stops, and to what extent the judicial restraint should be exercised or not. And some of the evidences are a little bit contradictory, and we have two trials going on at the same time, the impeachment trial and the criminal trial. Now, we've noticed that several witnesses would refuse to testify in the Constitutional Court because there is an ongoing trial on the criminal side. So there are complexities of the legal arguments and the uncertainties in the witnesses and evidences, and also the country is roughly divided into two, and the political climate is pretty fierce. So I think the court has an incentive to be extra cautious and look at each arguments and each elements very, very carefully. I think that adds time more than anything. So even though we have a pretty short and very public occasion, or the martial law declaration, but what's contained it legally is very nuanced and complex. I think that adds to the time, and that's why we're having a longer period of looking at it. I'm sure we're at the end of the journey in terms of getting the direction, but that's why the courts are meeting almost daily to talk about many different levels and the aspects of the case.
Right. So it does seem like this case, the court has to consider more complex situations. Now, so this final ruling on Yoon's impeachment is closely tied to constitutionality of the December 3rd martial law declaration. Attorney An, what are the key legal aspects the court would need to consider to evaluate?
Well, maybe there's many issues, but two major issues. One is the procedural and substantive issues. For the procedural issues that, for example, then December 3rd martial law declaration, whether they fail to meet procedural requirements such as the cabinet deliberation process. And there's also some different interesting, witness comment on the many witnesses on what happens, and they have a different view on the same incident. So the court have to make decision on which one is which. So that's the procedural issues. Also, not only that, the deliberation process, when actually they send, mobilize military forces, was it excessive forces or not? Is there any, is there any need for that, right? And second thing is the substantive issues that under the Korean Constitution, there's 3 cases you allow for the martial law declaration: is war or armed conflict, or the something similar, national emergency. And then the Korean Constitution Court have look at whether the December 3rd martial declaration meet any of 3 conditions, right? So is there war or there's the national emergency something? So interesting about that expression that's called similar national emergency, right? So it means there have to be something like the national emergency, and the court have to make decision on determination on what is the scope of national emergency. And I guess the defense team is working very hard to make enlarge that is the scope of national emergency, but we'll have to wait and see how the KCC come up with their decision on that issue.
So was it really worth it to declare a martial law? That's going to be...
Well, it's qualified to do. It's that you have right. It's not there. I mean, the Constitution, gives the right, that's the president's right, limited immunity. It's not absolute immunity. It means that certain cases that the court can peer the structure. So basically, what happened was that in certain cases, the president also can be prosecuted, such as the treason case, insurrection. So that's the things that the court would decide on that issue, that whether there was the procedurally and substantively is qualified to do so under the circumstances.
Right. Now, to Professor Song, yesterday the Constitutional Court rejected National Assembly impeachment motion against Choi Jae-hae, chair of the Board of Audit and Inspection of Korea, who was accused of improperly auditing President Yoon's office and residence. Some people argue that the dismissal of the latest impeachment case lends credibility to Yoon's claim that the opposition party was misusing impeachment processes, and others say that each case should be judged independently. How do you view this issue?
Well, each case should be different. We look at each case as kind of a separate world in which we have to make sense out of it. The alleged improper use or abuse of impeachment power on the part of the legislature on the opposition side is a separate wrong. So you cannot make 2 wrongs to make one right. They are separate issues that need to be dealt with differently. There's no "you're bad too" defense. So both sides should face separate consequences. My guess is that voters will probably take the opportunity, opposition parties' obstructionism into account in the next election and public polls. But what President Yoon is facing are strictly legal at this point, 1 constitutional, 1 criminal.
So as we await for the final impeachment ruling for President Yoon, if the court upholds the impeachment, Attorney An, what immediate legal and procedural steps would follow for the presidency and government functions as well?
Under the Korean Constitution, and you have the 180-day window to re-elect the presidents. So I guess that once that the Korean Constitution, decide to remove the President Yoon from the office, and there will be the time started. So time starts. So it's 180 days. It's pretty short time, actually 6 months. So the process. In the meantime, that the acting president, and as of today, is deputy prime minister, right? But we have to see what happened to the impeachment trial, on the prime minister. So that's the thing where I see someone will have acting president until during the 180-day window.
So I'm curious, is the 180 days going to start counting when the trial is announced that day?
I suppose so, because it's 180 days. So it depends on the law, actually. If they want to clarify, they say it's a day. So they count it from, I think that the day on Judgment Day, they would count it from day 1, day 2, right?
All right. So a presidential election would be expected.
But not only presidential election, have to be in the office 180 days.
Right. Now, as opposed to this, Professor Song, if the impeachment is rejected, would there be any legal recourse for the opposition, or would this mark the final ruling on the matter?
Well, the impeachment trial has the original jurisdiction for the Constitutional Court. That means their decision is a final. There's no appeals process from there. But remember, we have two proceedings, one impeachment trial and the other is insurrection charges. The president usually have immunities from the charges, but the insurrection charges is one of the exceptions. So that will continue. So even if the rejection results in the impeachment trial, probably the opposition party will move on to the criminal trials. That's the legal front of it. But I'm sure politically there would be a lot of different maneuvers that has gone on even before the impeachment trial to go on, maybe intensified because we have seen both sides kind of coalescing each other and the rallying against one cause or one individuals or leaders. So I think that the Korea is looking at more uncertain directions because we have seen not only the divisions in the political sentiment, but the institutions like CIO, the judiciary, are getting a lot of hits. And maybe those kind of damages should be addressed in a public dialogues and the political actions going forward. So we're looking at a pretty long journey ahead.
Just a little bit of more question, Professor Song. So if this impeachment trial gets rejected, does President Yoon return right away to office?
Right. He's returned back to the office because that's a single question in the impeachment trial is whether his presidency will stop right there or not. So if the impeachment is rejected, then he's back to the office, no more acting president, and he has the full power. He made some promises as to, when he gets back to the office, maybe the amendment of Constitution he will initiate, but once he's back, we cannot hold him to the promise because in the past, a lot of presidents have mentioned amendment for the constitutions, but once they are back to the office or once they elected the president, they didn't do anything. That's why we have not had an amendment since 1987. So I don't see anything would be different this time, but we'll see.
So the Korea will watch closely, the nation will watch closely the developments that will come in the next few days. And this will mark a defining moment in South Korea's democratic history, of course. So we'll have to leave our discussion right here. Attorney An and Professor Song, thank you so much for your insights tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And that'll be all for us from Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.